We have 23,000 member contractors in the construction industry. And if you're a federal contractor, you've got whiplash. You're trying to figure out the regulations.
Meet Ben Brubeck, ABC's VP of Regulatory Affairs, fighting for contractor rights in Washington.
I don't even know if I want this federal money because there's so many strings attached to it.
Technology is not just for large contractors.
And Matt Abeles, ABC's Tech VP, on how AI and innovation are reshaping construction.
Some of the technology is really amazing. Autonomous large vehicles can go in places that might not be safe, like some of these mining sites.
The number of small businesses who have been awarded a federal contract declined by 60%.
So do you all see a pattern of policies based on the administration, based on who's in the White House?
There's obviously going to be a lot of ambiguities and gray areas of the regulation. But what a PLA does, it forces a contractor to negotiate.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to introduce you to Ben and to Matt. So Ben, I'd love to start off with you. Feel free to introduce yourself officially to the audience. And then Matt, I'll turn it over to you as well.
Yeah, thanks, Randy. It's great to be with you. Ben Brubeck here. I'm the Vice President of Regulatory Labor and State Affairs at ABC National. You may be familiar with our organization at ABC. We also have 67 chapters across the country, but we have 23,000 member contractors in the construction industry and suppliers and other folks in the industry that help our members out. And our motto is generally, fair and open competition. We try to help in our government affairs team, which I'm a part of. We try to provide a lot of value to our members and understanding a lot of the regulations and policies coming out of the administration, as well as at the state and local level. And we've certainly had a lot of things thrown our way in the last 4 years, and we're getting in the election season. So we're talking about some policies here today that impact our members on top of a lot of other just industry-wide issues. So looking forward to talking with you about all that today.
All right, thanks, Ben. Matt?
Matt Abeles, I'm the Vice President of Construction, Technology, and Innovation for ABC. Ben gave a nice overview of who we are, and what my team does and what I'm responsible for is making sure that all of those members that Ben mentioned, they understand how technology is going to help them be safer, help them be more profitable, and help them win more work. And it has been a crazy world lately with all the technologies coming out. There's probably 4,000 to 5,000 technologies out there in the building industry. So one of the things that we're trying to do is make sure that everyone knows that what technologies should you keep an eye on, which ones are delivering the most value, and how do you make the best decisions for your business when it comes to technology and not have just this fear of missing out, but understand what's going to actually deliver the right value for you. And especially with topics like artificial intelligence and cybersecurity and just overall impact, some of the things we're going to get into later. I think this is just an ever-changing world, and the high note is that technology is not just for large contractors. If you are a high-performing contractor, you are investing in some sort of technology, and that is not just hitting an easy button. So thank you very much for having me, and look forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. And one of the things I will say, I met Matt at the ABC conference earlier this year in Florida, and that was the first time I probably realized how much technology was out there to support construction. There were so many vendors that offered some sort of a technology package support. I'm like, whoa, I came back and actually was telling I was there with a coworker, and then I was telling my team when I came back, I'm like, okay, that's the one thing I was ignorant to. I did not realize that there are so many companies out here supporting on the technology side for construction. So excited to learn a little bit more about that world as well. So this is a general question regarding policies and so forth as we get ready to kickstart talking about some of the things that we are seeing in the federal space. So do you all see a pattern of policies based on the administration, based on who's in the White House and who's the majority in Congress?
Yeah, it's a bit of a whiplash, I think, depending on which administration's in power, whether it's Republican or Democrat. And we'll speak generally because the Trump administration was a bit unique compared to traditional Republican approaches to regulation. But they had a pretty aggressive deregulatory agenda, kind of rolling back a lot of the things that the Obama administration put in place. And then the Biden administration sort of undid all the things that the Trump administration did, and then did more things to layer on top of what the Obama administration did. So if you're a federal contractor, you've got whiplash. You're trying to figure out the regulations. You're wondering what happened to the old regulation. Then there's naturally going to be litigation about the regulations. And is that litigation live? Is there a preliminary injunction against the policy in question? So you really have to be on your toes and understand what the market looks like related to these regulations, because things happen so rapidly in the administration. And a lot of contractors, especially the subcontractors that are small businesses that don't have the ability to stay on top of these regulations, they're not seeing around the corners about how this is going to impact their business. So you've really got to be on your toes and understand, what's likely to happen in a new administration or the current administration. What's their regulatory agenda, and how do you comply with the new regulations? Do you have the right people in place? Do you have the right process in place? And there's obviously going to be a lot of ambiguities and gray areas of the regulation. And what do you do in that situation? What happens if you inadvertently violate the regulation? How do you respond to that and stuff? So there's a lot of issues that I hear from our members all the time, both large contractors and small contractors, related to the regulatory state. And they just want consistency at the end of the day, and they're not getting it.
And that is, I think, all of our plights. Like, can it just be status quo, right? Like, why does it have to be so complex in getting through all of the bureaucracies and so forth, just to be able to have a business, grow your business, right? Increase your revenues and do a job well done. So it is very tricky. Now, one of the things I'm curious with the ABC team, and so Matt, this can also pertain to you. It's like, how do you all keep up with everything that comes at you? All right. So do you all have individual teams that's working around the clock, per se, to really help you see what's going on, hear what's going on, like be in multiple places at one time? Like, how do you guys support?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we do at ABC is part of the value proposition of joining ABC is we provide, a lot of services to our members, but in the government affairs world, we'll help them understand the new regulations that are coming out, the regulations that are being litigated. How do you comply with the new regulations? What do you not like about the regulations? We help offer opportunities for the industry to comment on the regulations, to shape them, to make them more common sense, or actually, feasible in many instances, or, and so that's the services we provide. We've got a great talented crew at our national office. We work closely with our membership. We ask questions to them. We get feedback from them. We also have coalitions that we're part of, where we lead, where we get overall industry perspective too. And then we've got relationships with all the agencies, for better or for worse. We have to work with certain agencies, even if they're putting out bad regulations or regulations we disagree with. We still have to have a professional relationship with them. So we've got relationships with them, and we kind of understand where things are going, and help our federal contractors especially understand that. Because what happens is they really have a target on their backs. And what happens in an administration where Congress is divided is they can't get their legislative or their policy agenda over the finish line. So what they do is they issue a number of executive orders, which then go into regulatory process. And they really can't do it for the entire world, the entire construction industry. So what they do is they sort of target just federal contractors. They put a sort of target on them, thinking that if they can regulate them in a certain direction, that'll affect the overall industry, because the federal contractors are going to have to make these adjustments to their business in order to comply with the federal rules. So why not, do it for the rest of their rules? So what they really like to target and pick on the federal contractors. Federal contractors generally know this. It's the cost of doing business with the government, but it's why a lot of projects are a lot more expensive. There's so much more risk. There's so much more uncertainty. And that's an area of frustration for the contractors who maybe dabble in federal contracting and then get burnt, because they don't realize, like, wow, this is a lot different than the private sector, or even working for state and local governments who are much more transparent and have less risk.
So that's actually great. You actually answered one of the questions I was going to ask you. So are you all seeing all of these regulations, policies, some of what we're going to talk about? Are you seeing that really flowing down into the commercial space, into the state, local municipalities? Are you seeing that taking effect?
Yeah, it's interesting. So it's sort of indirect. There's a lot of federal regulations that apply to federal contractors that we push back on. For example, the federal contractor vaccine mandate issue. ABC was one of the leaders pushing back on that. And we were able to secure a preliminary injunction against the entire rule. And that would have affected all the employees of a firm that does federal contracting, whether they were performing state or local work or not. So that's the kind of stuff we'll see. We're also seeing just the administration maybe not doing specifically activity on federal contracts, but through federal agency grant programs or tax incentives, they're sort of making the private sector and state and local governments kind of march to the tune of what the administration wants in order to get the financing or the tax incentives. And that's been a lot more aggressive under the Biden administration than I've ever seen before, under the Obama and Clinton administrations especially. And that's definitely concerning, because we're getting calls from state partners who we build for, our members build for, and they're saying, hey, I don't even know if I want this federal money because there's so many strings attached to it. And there's so much risk and uncertainty, I'm not sure I can comply with this. And when there's a lack of regulatory clarity, that increases risk and cost for the customer, whether they're government as well as the contractor. So it's kind of a negative feedback loop. You get less competition from those contractors, and then prices go up for the developers and the government stakeholders, and then it just gets worse and worse. So we're hoping to break that cycle by creating some clarity and some consistency across the board.
So that is interesting that you said that, right? It's this vicious cycle that we end up in, because we know, being actively involved in business development here with the federal contractors, that you hear constantly from the government, we need you to, one, sharpen your pencils.
Right.
Two, we need more contractors. We need more contractors. Our work, our industry base, as you guys know, is declined, 50 to 60%. Well, you're not helping. And this is where we share that, like, you aren't helping the process to increase your industry base if you keep putting out policies that's going to steer them away from helping. Right. We are at a place in the contracting right now where it's really at a not just an all-time low, but like critical part, right, at this point, with the amount of contractors that are doing work for the federal government.
Yeah, that's right. So, I talked to our friends at the SBA Office of Advocacy, where they actually, intervene on behalf of small businesses when regulations come out. And sometimes they'll write letters saying, hey, this hurts small businesses, don't do it. They're often ignored, but they have data that shows that the number of small businesses who have been awarded a federal contract from 2010 to 2020, which is pre-COVID, which is probably a good metric, that's declined by 60%.
Yep.
So 60% fewer individual companies are getting contracts. These are small businesses, and they're scratching their heads being like, why is this? And the answer is that, well, it's a death by 1,000 cuts. There's a lot of regulations that are making this harder for small businesses to move forward, and then they're begging small businesses and large companies to compete, and they're not providing the relief. But I have to say, I feel very sympathetic for a lot of the contracting officers, the procurement officials in the federal agencies, because they are doing their jobs the best they can, but they are really limited by what the FARC says and what Congress's laws pass and what the executive and regulatory agencies are doing that direct what they're doing. The folks who are contracting officers are generally exceptional people that want to provide value to both the taxpayer and also fulfill their mission of the agency. And they're being basically told to do their jobs with one or both hands tied behind their back. And then when the regulations add costs, they have no other way to make that up without going through lots of red tape. And so the system is really broken. When you look at the way that the federal agencies do things, it's broken from an appropriations perspective, it's broken from an expertise and from a regulatory perspective. And it's just, at the end of the day, it's a mess, and it's hard to undo this and fix it. We're all living it every single day. It's super frustrating. I don't think the average taxpayer really understands how awful it is.
Yeah, they don't. And that's one of the things that we do talk about, talk with potential clients. It's like, wouldn't it be, as a taxpayer, you probably want to get involved. You don't realize, you can complain and be on the outside, or you can actually try to be on the inside by helping. Right. But I know we want to get going through some of our topics. We could continue talking about some of these parts of it. But one of the things I know you brought up, we talked about labor shortages and so forth. So are you seeing, like, the labor shortage, the additional cost, all of these factors that's playing in as well to the construction industry? Are you seeing that kind of still trickling down from COVID? Or is it like a whole nother situation that's blooming right now?
Well, we've had a skilled labor shortage in the construction industry. It's been a top priority for before COVID. I've been at ABC for 20 years, so that's always been a top concern, and so have regulations, honestly. But you know, it's just basic demographics. You've got the baby boomers who are heavily in the trades; they're aging
Right.
out. You've got a workforce that isn't as interested in blue collar careers because of
Mhm.
the education system and incentivizing guidance counselors to put people into four-year colleges. We're trying to address that. We're trying to, you know, make the industry an attractive place to come and earn while you learn through an apprenticeship program or through some other workforce development program. You don't get stuck in the college debt trap, and you can have a quick ladder of mobility into the, you know, into the trades and then into owning your own business and being an entrepreneur. All these great things the construction industry offers. But at the end of the day, our skilled labor shortage in the industry right now is 500,000 people, and there's about 8.4 million people in the industry. So it's significant, and we look at this over a year basis, and we think it's probably going to get worse. Although there's lots of efforts to try to mitigate it. There's lots of new technology, which Matt's an expert in, that's trying to, you know, understand we're always going to have a skilled labor shortage, but how can we be more efficient, and how can we use labor and tools better to sort of, you know, bridge that deficit. But we are seeing the skilled labor shortage, and then added costs are significant. We know that construction industry's material costs
Mhm.
for the commercial side have gone up about 41% since the start of the pandemic. And
Mm.
a lot of that is because of inflation. It's because of supply chain issues, lots of issues that are affecting the cost. So, you know, it's kind of a perfect storm of a labor shortage, which adds costs and reduces
Mhm.
contractor base. You got more expensive materials, and on the customer side, you know, they've got a lot of projects that have been planned out and scoped out in a certain budget range, and now those budgets are blown out and broken. So the federal agencies are going to quickly learn, if they haven't learned already, that they're going to have to scrap these projects, rescope them, or figure out a way to get more money by cutting other projects and building them. And I think that's the phase we're in right now. Despite all this extra money coming in through the infrastructure bill and through all these other, you know, big federal spending bills that theoretically would benefit the construction industry, the taxpayers just aren't getting the same value that they expected when it was passed.
Yeah, and I definitely can speak to, you know, what you shared about that because of such the inflation is so high and all of the other costs associated. When you are speaking to the contracting officers, when you are speaking to program managers, you know, like one of the questions I always ask them is, how old is your projection of this budget, right? Because
Yeah.
if your budget projection is at least 2 to 3 years old, we already have a problem, right?
Right.
And because, as you guys know, things are slow in getting through the acquisition process. So things are sitting on, you know, on the shelf, they're tabled, whatever. And then oh, we're gonna put it out there for bid. Okay, great. That was your original budget 3 years ago. That's not going to fly today. So are we doing supplementals? Are you reevaluating? Because the contractor gets caught in that, right, as well.
Right. It's a risk for them. And I'm getting calls from contractors all the time saying, you know, the public doesn't know it costs us hundreds of thousands of dollars to put together a proposal in response to an
Mm.
RFP that a federal agency puts out. And we're not going to take a risk on something that's stale, because we know we're going to get caught in having, you know, our material caught up and going through the whole process with subcontractors. And we're just not going to do it until it's a, you know, an updated, sensible approach to these projects.
Well, this is a great segue into the apprenticeship. We can talk about the apprenticeship program, right? Because that is supposed to address the workforce labor shortages. But I know that there's been some changes. So you want to share a little bit about the Department of Labor's apprenticeship program updates?
Yeah, happy to do it. And so if you're not familiar with apprenticeship, it's government registered apprenticeship programs are what we're talking about. And what that means is that these are apprenticeship programs. They're like 4 or 5 year programs that take workers and get them into a specific trade and skill them up. And it's usually a time or a competency base or a blend of the two to get through these programs. And ABC is a big believer in registered apprenticeship programs. We have more than 450 across the country through our
Mhm.
chapters. And then our members have their own government registered apprenticeship programs too. But besides registered apprenticeship, there's all kinds of other ways to upskill your workers and get them into the industry. So what we call at ABC, we have an all of the above approach to workforce development. We're not focused only on government registered apprenticeship programs. But the Biden administration is very focused on the registered apprenticeship program and enhancing that. And when I use the word enhance, I'll probably use some air quotes there, because they've come out with a proposed rule that really overhauls the entire government registered apprenticeship systems regulatory framework at the Department of Labor. And we've commented on that. There was a proposed rule. We submitted comments on it. And the rule is now over at OIRA, and we're expecting a final rule to come out shortly. But the people who are involved in the registered apprenticeship world are not happy with the rule. There's a lot of new added costs and added regulation, a lot of confusing new regulations related to state apprenticeship agencies that regulate apprenticeship programs at the state level, if you're not what they call a federal agency state. And they don't like it. They feel like their wings have been clipped. So there's a lot of changes in here that I think are actually harmful to the skilled labor shortage problem we have in the industry. And I think my opinion is shared by a lot of other industry partners we work with closely, as well as some of the career and technical education providers that are now wrapped into this new regulation that have never really been regulated before, as well as the state apprenticeship agencies too. So we're concerned about this. And overall, the registered apprenticeship system has not been widely embraced by the construction industry. People may not know, but only about 250,000 people are in the government registered apprenticeship programs for the construction industry at any given time.
Mm-hmm.
And these are 4 or 5 year programs. So they actually graduate about 45,000 people per year, which is a nice number. But when you look at the skilled labor shortage across the industry of 500,000 people,
right,
we're talking about a 10-year lag in what we need to do this year alone.
Mm-hmm.
So clearly the employers are not enjoying this system. And there's lots of reasons for that now. And we think that the new rule makes it even worse. And the other thing to keep in mind for your membership is that, or for your listeners and your audience, is that the registered apprenticeship is favored by the unions. The unions have a very strong, powerful lobby presence within the Biden administration, and the registered apprenticeship system is pretty much favoring the union way of training. 69% of all registered apprentices in registered apprenticeship programs are through union affiliated programs. So the Biden administration knows that when they're pushing apprenticeships through the registered system, they're helping unions and unionized contractors get more work. And what's so interesting about this rulemaking is that in the middle of this rulemaking, the Biden administration issued an executive order that asked federal agencies to come up with ways to require registered apprenticeship participation or some kind of enhancements or some kind of affiliation on federal contracts and federally assisted contracts. So there's 2 things we're kind of fighting at the same time. The first one is this rule from the Department of Labor. The second one is this new executive order. We haven't seen a proposed rule out of that. That's something I'd probably expect out of a second term of the Biden administration if they're elected. And so that is something federal contractors need to be really aware of, not just for construction, but all industries. If a lot of these industries are very immature in the apprenticeship space compared to the construction industry, this is a whole new regulatory scheme that they're going to have to contend with at some point if the Biden administration moves forward with their initial plans. So we're waiting for this final rule to come out with the Department of Labor and see how bad it is, see if they've made any modifications to the significant comments that ABC's filed, as well as a lot of other industry trade associations and partners and unions too.
Okay, wow, I know that is a big deal that's going on. I was actually speaking to a large prime last week, and he brought it up as one of their concerns, right? But he's like, hey, we're willing to deal with that one. We can figure out how to deal with it. So I know it is an issue. I wanted to bring Matt in on this conversation because you mentioned that there's technology then that can help the workforce. So is there something that construction companies, or let's say construction companies are now going to look towards technology in some sort of a way to help balance out this, these regulations?
So I would take a step back, and I think that the current workforce, to attract them in, it's a different workforce. They've got different skill sets. They're much more innovative. They grew up on these. They grew up on smartphones. I grew up on a StarTAC that was $10 a minute. You used it in case of emergencies.
Right.
And I think that there's an opportunity for us to show that we are an innovative industry. We are a safe industry. And one of the things we're doing is we've got technology partners who are helping us. For example, we are working on bringing immersive reality experiences to our chapters to bring to career fairs, so that anybody looking into a construction company can put on, an immersive reality headset and they can see what's a day in the life of 5 minutes as an electrical contractor,
Mhm.
you know, as a mechanical contractor. So we are doing some of those, some of those types of efforts. We partner with, some of the, big tech. We partner with Meta. Meta wants to show the world that immersive reality is not just for gamers, that it is actually being used to upskill the future workforce. And we've got partners who are helping do that. But again, we're attracting a different talent and a different pool.
Yeah.
One of the things that we do, we have a national technology committee, and we go to different innovation hubs every year. And we recently went to Autodesk, and they were telling us about some of the data they have from Dodge shows that you've got about 41% of electrical contractors are going to retire in the next 5 years. That means
Wow.
it's a different set of talent coming in that we have to show and attract to construction.
Mhm.
And that's one of the things we're doing with technology. There is so much opportunity, and I'll get into this later, but there's been a big paradigm shift. If you are a high performing contractor, it doesn't matter how big you are investing in technology, and that technology expertise in many cases comes from that younger is going to help some of the leaders in a construction company. They can come in and be a part of that technology process, implementation, decision making. But that shift has changed. If you're a top performing contractor, you're investing in different types of technology, ranging from project management tools to even robotics. But we are seeing that the industry has changed, and that future workforce is going to help us move the needle.
That is definitely one way to bridge that gap and bridge the generations as well, right? Because even in our industry, what we do specifically in the business development, we realize that the way we reach like the older generation, right, of getting the message out, of using the social media versus, okay, they all go to a website, versus the technology of this QR codes and the this and the that. Like it's different. It's different how you communicate with them. So that's great that you guys are trying to put together meeting them where they're at, right? Meeting that generation where they're at, try to bring them into the workforce using technology to help them see the future of it.
And you made a comment earlier, like how do you get your arms around all of this? And from a technology side, there's a lot of different buckets. You've got prefab, which isn't even really technology, that's more innovation, just being smarter about how we build. Project management tools, building information modeling. Obviously, artificial intelligence is a big deal these days. Robotics, immersive reality. We take a very data-driven approach. We listen to what our members are using and what technologies are providing that value. We don't just bring in any technology company to an event because they want to give us a sponsorship dollar. We're very methodical in who's bringing the most value. We evaluate companies constantly and look at where are our needs as a membership, and try and make this, I would say, digestible, and showing our members, hey, there's all these thousands of technologies. Here's the ones that are providing value to our members who have a track record of success. And for us, in just bringing value to our members, we actually work on creating different discounts for the members. So if we work with a technology partner, we get some, as an ABC member, you would get a discount on the technologies that we have specific partnerships if they go through a certain level of criteria that we have. So, that's it's ever changing. There's been a lot of money invested into the construction technology space, which has made this big boom of technologies, but we are trying to make this as digestible as possible for the membership so they know what's going to bring value. And it's not just this fear of missing out. We don't want them investing in technologies because they see a big shiny object. We want them to do what's best for their business.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily their forte of technology, right? Unless you've got an IT team that's surrounding you that can really help you go through it and cipher through, this is good, this is not, right? It's important to have that assistance. So that's awesome.
And the small mid-sized companies do not have 6 chief innovation officers,
exactly.
chief technology officers.
Exactly.
they typically, they might have an IT team, but that's different. An IT expert is going to help you with your computers. They're going to help
Email
with things
your,
like
yep.
cybersecurity,
Mhm.
but they're not going to be the ones who are going to make the most informed decisions when it comes to buying a project management tool,
Mhm.
buying a drone and the benefits that that brings. They're two very different things. And that's where you get more people involved in the field and some of that decision process when it comes to the small mid-sized contractors.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that information there. So Ben, I'll pick back up with you. Since we talked a little bit in there about the unions, it might be a good segue for us to then talk about PLA, the
Yeah.
project labor agreement, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a hot topic here at ABC. It's one of our top priority issues, and I'm getting just tons of calls from contractors, small businesses, GCs, and contracting officers saying, "Hey, where are we at with this issue? What do you think we can do here?" So, give your audience a little background. Back in 2002, the President Biden signed an executive order requiring project labor agreements on federal contracts of $35 million or more. And that went through a rulemaking process, and the rulemaking process, we commented on it. We solicited feedback from the industry. Most of the industry broadly doesn't like the rule at all. ABC members almost 100% hate the rule. And ended up, the final rule came out from the FAR Council, and it's effective January 22nd of this year. And so
Mhm.
what we're seeing now are contracts that are live that have what they call project labor agreement mandates or requirements.
Right.
That's what PLA stands for, project labor agreement. And what a PLA does, if you're not familiar with it, is it forces a contractor to negotiate a agreement with unions as a condition of winning the contract. And the terms of the PLA can vary, but the FAR Council says it has to have this. And then a lot of other terms get thrown in there that the unions want. And typically what the unions say most PLAs have to have in order to get an executed PLA is it forces contractors to get all or most of their employees through union hiring halls. You've got to follow union work rules that are outlined in the collective bargaining agreements. You got to pay into union pension and benefits programs, and you've got to use apprentices through union programs, even if you have your own programs. And then the employees of any non-union contractor, even if they're allowed to work on the project, typically have to either join a union or pay union dues or agency shop fees as a condition of employment. And a lot of the contractors complain that they have to pay fringe benefits under the Davis-Bacon Act into the union plans, but
Mhm.
the employees will never benefit from that if they work the project and then go back and work for their existing employer. All that money gets forfeited to the unions. It's a windfall for the union programs. And what contractors do is they'll do double benefit payments, once to their existing programs and once to the union plan, so the employees are made whole in their own programs, and it's an enticement for them to come back. So that double benefits payments cost makes them less competitive. And so
Mm.
what we've seen in the marketplace is a lot of non-union contractors and even some unionized contractors are really opposed to this rule. They're having a hard time reaching agreements with the unions, and their bids are less competitive. So they're just walking away from the federal contracting space right now. And it's so bad that we actually filed a lawsuit in March in Jacksonville. It's a federal lawsuit challenging the FAR Council's final rule. We're still waiting for a decision by the judge there. There was a lawsuit filed by AGC, Associated General Contractors,
Mhm.
earlier this year, but they filed it ahead of when the final rule was in effect. So a judge threw that out basically due to ripeness and standing issues. Our lawsuit doesn't have those problems at all. We think we're actually going to get a ruling on the merits of the case. And I'm getting calls from federal contracting officers saying, "Hey, what's going on with your lawsuit? Are you guys going to win here? We hope you win because these PLAs totally hamstring us." So in the
Yep,
construction industry, 89% of the workforce is non-union. So
exactly.
you've got states with very few unions where they're now being told you've got to, work with unions. These are out-of-state companies with out-of-state labor coming in, disrupting local markets,
Yep.
and kind of putting the public safety at risk too. I testified at a hearing before Congress a couple of weeks ago before the Oversight Committee, and there was a gentleman who testified with me from the Louisiana's Coastal Protection Restoration Authority, and he was saying this rule is already disrupting their hurricane preparedness projects and coastal restoration projects, where they're a cost sharing partner with the Army Corps of Engineers. They have a 35% cost sharing arrangement on these federal contracts the Corps is procuring. And they're saying they're getting less bidders, and they're worried that this is going to add costs and force them to basically trim back the seawalls they're building to help, mitigate floods from hurricanes. So it's a public safety issue to them, but for ABC, it is that, but also just pure discrimination. I mean, the government is telling you you have to affiliate with unions in order to get a taxpayer-funded construction contract. That's just fundamentally a violation of our freedom. And it doesn't make any sense from a policy perspective, especially with the skilled labor shortage the industry has of more than 500,000 people. They're cutting out qualified contractors and labor that have been doing this work and can do this work. ABC members built more than 50% of all federal contracts, over 25 million since 2009. You just can't lose this big base of people doing this work without it really increasing costs and creating all kinds of havoc, which we're seeing now to some degree, and we're going to see a lot more of it unless our litigation prevails or common sense prevails or the election overturns this policy. So we're holding our breath on the litigation side. That's the most short-term solution to this whole thing. But taxpayers are losing out too. I mean, we know PLA requirements increase costs between 12% and 20% on average. It's going to be a lot more in some states where there's no unions at all to pick up the slack. So, again, we talked about added cost. This is just another added cost in the regulatory space that's reducing competition, and it's going to force a lot of these projects to be canceled or delayed or rescoped. And, again, bad policy is just adding to the woes of the perfect storm the industry is facing right now.
So yes, that is definitely a hard policy that hit the industry. And I was at an industry day about a month or so ago, and he's one of the main contracting officers with a higher warrant, right? And for those who don't know what a higher warrant is, he's able to sign off on larger projects. And he was tasked with talking to industry about the PLAs and CMMC, like everything bad. He's like, I've got on my running shoes because, I know you guys are going to be chasing me. And people brought up, of course, right, some of the large primes that was in the room actually brought up the whole thing with, one, you guys know Texas is a right to work state. That's already an issue, right? And so how you plan on getting around this? And his thing was, like you said, he's like, look, we're barely figuring this out ourselves. We are just like going with the bare minimum of what we understand. He said, literally, there's 3 of us working on it. We've been tasked. They have the higher warrants. And he said, we go into separate rooms, we read it, and then we come out and we say, okay, now what's your interpretation? What did you get from that, right? Because it's so nuanced, they're figuring out. And he's like, we have not even done one of these yet. Right.
Yeah.
And I just was on a call last week with another agency engineer, and he was saying, yeah, we're actually getting close to signing off on one. It will be the very first one if we get it done. Right. And I know that a lot of the primes that we're talking to, their strategy is, that's fine. I'm not going to bid on anything over 35 million. Anything close to 35 million, I'm not going to bid on. Well, there's a lot of MilCon projects. So what's going to happen again to the contractor base that would provide that service?
That's exactly it. And this is just so anti-competitive and violates, this is what our lawsuit talks about. This violates the Federal Competition and Contracting Act, which CCA requires full and open competition from qualified bidders. These are qualified companies that are now getting pushed out by this executive overreach. And so we're hopeful that our lawsuit will prevail. But yeah, the contracting officers, they're in a bad place because of this. They're trying to execute the new rule, but this is all part of the Biden administration's agenda to be the most pro-union president in history. He said this over and over again. He's said this in union halls. He announced the executive order on PLAs in a union hall. This is like straight political pandering. There's no logic to this. They try to justify this through some studies that are questionable, through experiences in other industries. But the bottom line is the federal agencies haven't required a PLA under the Obama administration's policy, which made PLAs optional since 2009. They had an opportunity to do so on 3,200 contracts. They only did it 12 times. And of those 12 times, a couple of projects didn't go well. So there's like a real world experiment we just lived through for the last 14 years that they're totally ignoring and pretending like, oh, this is going to be awesome. And so the results are going to speak for themselves very soon, whether it's through the courts or through the actual experience of the contracting officers. And ABC will hate to say I told you so.
Yeah, and it is sad because I know that they have already warned us, like, do not ask for an exception. We cannot give exceptions because it has to go to the senior procurement director, like for example, USACE, has to go all the way to him for any kind of an exception. So they're like, don't even ask. Like
That's right. It's got to go all the way up the military chain of command. Even the head of construction for the Army Corps can't give an
cannot.
exemption project. It's
Yeah.
got to go to the guy, Doug Bush, in charge of like military tanks and
Yep. Yep.
weapons and everything. And
Logistics and
so
everything
it's
else.
just
Yep.
like, it doesn't go all the way up and down that fast. It's going to slow it down. And
No,
the contracting
absolutely.
officers are just saying, we know these projects the best.
Mhm.
This exception process is designed to be a dead letter so that they can run around and say, oh, the agency, there's it's not a blanket requirement, when in fact the reality is it is a blanket requirement right now. We're already aware of contracts that they've had no bidders on, or one bidder, and now they're trying to get an exception and they can't even get the exception because it's taking so long to go up. So they've got the results of what a PLA will do, and it's still it's still moving forward. So they're hoping that us industry, their partners, can help kill this through the courts, which is really the only solution in the short term. But that's where we're at right now. And ABC, I lead a coalition of like-minded organizations in the construction space that are fighting this. We've got a coalition website called buildamericalocal.com where you can learn more and you can write your member of Congress. There's some legislative solutions on this that frankly are there, but the Biden administration would never sign into law. So they're mainly to help kind of transition the next administration, if there is one, into the right direction on this issue. But it's a huge issue for us. This hearing I participated in Congress was exceptional because the Democrats didn't show up because I don't think they want to talk about this issue because they know it's a loser for them. And so they didn't have any questions for like the witnesses that were providing a lot of color on what's going on. So I'm hopeful that there's some changes that are on the horizon that'll make this easier for everyone. But in the meantime, we're telling our members and contractors, hang on, wait for this decision to come. We're telling the contracting officers, hopefully hope is on the way. And the states are now saying, hey, we need your help on this. Can we get involved in your lawsuit? So everybody's focused on this and are very concerned.
Because they're seeing it eventually going to be trickling down into the states. They feel like that's going to end up happening.
Well, this cost sharing partnership I mentioned earlier,
Okay,
this
the cost
with
sharing.
Louisiana, that's a sort of unique arrangement. They're worried, but then outside of the direct federal contracts, which we're talking about, the Biden administration is pushing PLAs on federally assisted projects through these agency grant programs that they've created in response to the infrastructure bill. So state and local governments are being told, hey, you're more likely to get funded for your project that you've applied for federal money for if you require a PLA. Now, a lot of states have passed laws that restrict government mandated PLAs at the state and local level. A total of 25 states have active laws that do this. And so they have some level of kind of, immunity against a federal push, the carrot and stick approach for PLA requirements. But there's a number of states that love PLAs. They're blue states. And they basically say, yeah, the Biden administration is telling us we have to put a PLA in here. We're going to do this. And so our members in those states are getting boxed out at a greater rate than they normally are on these public projects. Then the Biden administration is pushing PLAs now on these Inflation Reduction Act clean energy tax incentives. They're basically saying the private developers are more likely to get the tax incentives at a greater rate if they require PLAs. And then they're also going to give immunity for some of these new penalties that the legislation requires related to prevailing wage and apprenticeship. So they're using the federal tax code, they're weaponizing it, the IRS, to push the labor agenda, which is something never been done at the federal level before. So we're seeing this kind of all of government approach, which feeds back into the Biden administration's push to be the most pro-union president in history. We're seeing that actually happen. And ABC's members are mostly non-union contractors. We do have union signatory contractors. And even the union signatory contractors are saying, I can't operate under a PLA that they're proposing. It just doesn't work for the union I'm signatory to. Yeah, so it gets made into a union versus non-union issue, but it's actually really more than that.
Everybody's union. Okay, everybody's issue.
Yeah.
Okay. Did not realize that the unions also have issues with it. Okay.
So if you're signatory like the Steelworkers Union and some of these unions that aren't in the traditional building trades umbrella at NAB2, you can't sign agreements with other unions that get workers from those other union halls, and so you can't work on these projects. It's a different form of discrimination, but it's the same effect. Less competition.
Okay, well, thank you, Ben. That is very, very detailed, and I hope you guys go back and play this like 5 times and write notes, okay, audience, because there's a lot in there. I know we want to get to Matt as well, so Matt, let's start diving in a little bit into what
Yeah.
you're going to share, and then we'll see how our time progresses. But CMMC, that is our other baby, right? That
Yeah,
we got
I,
to
you
talk
know,
about. And for
I
those that
will.
don't know what CMMC is, it is Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, and that is a requirement now by DoD. Well, as of October of next year, officially. So, Matt, I would love for you to start the conversation.
Yeah, I'll start by one of the top things that we talk about at every bit of technology, education, event, lunch.
Mhm.
I can't harp on the importance of cybersecurity. Even before I get into the CMMC, there's a recent study from Sophos that talks about the fact that construction is the #2 industry in the United States being hit right under education.
Mhm.
And if you don't recall, there was a big target attack almost 10 years ago now, but that happened because a subcontractor got hacked. And
Mhm.
if you look at the construction industry, unfortunately, we have a lot of our members and just non-members. Just everyone in construction is dealing with this problem.
Mhm.
Today, we are more reactive than proactive, and unfortunately, I've talked to many construction businesses that have been hurt. Some have almost gone under
Mm.
because of cybersecurity attacks. It's a big problem, and one of the issues is the fact that hackers do not need to be as sophisticated as they used to be. There's tools out there to allow it's called amateur to be a hacker. And
Wow.
there's so I think there's a lot that we can do as an industry. ABC has built our own cybersecurity website to give people access to resources, and it's not gated because it's meant to help the entire industry.
Okay.
But this is one of the biggest issues we are dealing with, and it is not going away. It's going to get harder, and kind of understanding what the insurance policies are is getting much more murky. It's a very gray area. So there's a lot there. Not to get too much into the weeds, and then you look at CMMC. And CMMC, as you said, Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. This has been ongoing for a while. ABC has had a voice. We have constantly made it a point to talk about what this means. If you do not have the proper level of cybersecurity, you are not going to be able to bid on federal work. And one thing that Ben and I are making sure of is that our members are aware of everything that they are going to need. The last thing we want is someone not to win work based on not having an understanding of what those requirements are. We do have a voice in this. Ben, I'll pass to you to talk a little bit about this, but we have been at the forefront of making sure that some of these regulations don't overcost some of our small mid-sized contractors and take them out of that opportunity. Ben, you've been more, you've been closer to this than I on the actual, legislative and some of our recommendations.
Yeah, so ABC submitted comments on the proposed rule, and we brought in some cybersecurity experts to help us with our comments, just because this stuff is very technical, and I'm sure it gives lots of headaches to small businesses in the industry. But we're trying to balance, the need for national security, which this is clearly a response to some serious bad actors out there, finding a way into the federal system and exploiting, small contractors and issues there. And now we're trying to balance that out with okay, can you really still get the federal contractors who provide services with you to comply with this, and at what cost, and how does it scare them away like everything else we're looking at? So we've got a lot of comments that we submitted, as well as with some other coalitions, and we're kind of waiting to sort of see what the final blowback on all this is going to be. But we're providing all this information to our members just to let them know this is happening, because a lot of the small businesses we talk to still don't quite get it and understand this is a risk they've got to account for. We've got some great people that can help them do like a cybersecurity hygiene check, and kind of get them to know, are they doing the things they should be doing anyway, regardless of what's going to happen. And I think this CMMC 2.0 is actually going to be federal agency wide at some point. It's limited to DoD now. At some point, it's going to apply to all federal work. And I think a lot of states and localities are seeing the same vulnerabilities of hackers, and may take some of this and push this in through their regulatory process. So I think it's coming. It's going to take a while for that to happen, but everybody, even if you don't do federal work, should start thinking about how do you make your business safe? And this also gets back to a lot of issues with ransomware and hacking and things like that that are really crippling some of these small businesses that are facing these cyber threats.
Right. This is something that, as we know, they are saying as of October 1st of 2025, that this is going to go into effect, right? And so, for example, with the NIST scores, people may not know that you need to have this already self-assessment done even now for you to win work in the DoD. So that's an important piece that if you're wanting to even get involved, you need to have a NIST score, whether it's negative, like I said, whether it's negative or whatever, right? You need to have one in there. But by next year, right, the levels, you're gonna have to start paying third-party certifications for this service. And we know of small businesses that are already paying for the certification, and it is in the tens of thousands of dollars, right? So, you wonder how many is going to be able to continue down that path. And then part of it, of course, is that it flows down to the subcontractor, right? That if your subcontractors also have to have this certification, that is where the concern is, right? One of the main concerns is I've even asked the contracting officers, like, have you seen a prime be able to implement this? And they're like, oh yeah, all the large primes. I'm like, okay, no, not the large primes, right? They don't count. They have the money. What about the regular mid-market primes that are purely GCs that do have all their subs? What happens there?
Yeah, I mean, it's a problem, especially for the small businesses. Like we talked about the death of small business federal contractors, and I think that's just another thing that maybe will drive them out of the market. We hope not. We're hoping that we give them the right materials and insights to overcome this. And there's an opportunity here for small business, though. If they do this right, they might be able to really figure out how to be a premier small business that does this CMMC 2.0 compliance to the letter of the law. And then, they could have their choice of contracts because I think it's going to cull a lot of firms that are on the edge. And I think that's the hope, is that everyone gets into compliance. But the truth is that they have more attractive, less risky options in other markets in an economy like this, where there's so much construction spending and things are booming. They're just going to leave the federal space or figure out a way to mitigate the risks as much as possible by partnering and venturing and stuff like that. So I think, there needs to be a balance here. It's hard with something like this, which is so very clearly a threat to national security, though.
Understood, for sure. Yes,
And
Matt.
then Randy, think about from the cybersecurity front, how connected our job sites are. Now your tools are connected. Now your materials are connected. Your large and small mid-sized equipment is connected. You've got more access points for hackers to get in there. So, it's
true.
I think it's important, but I just can't press on enough how important this issue is, and it's going to get harder and more important.
I agree. It is definitely important. We just have to figure out how you solve for helping the contractors through this, because we're on the other side, right, of it on a daily basis. And so one of the things we wanted to also talk about, Matt, is artificial intelligence. We can't get away from artificial intelligence. So how do you see that playing into construction?
So I mentioned on the technology front that we've had this paradigm shift. So one thing that I'll mention is, so ABC, we have what's called our Excellence in Construction Awards. So we award our highest performing projects across the country. Last year, we awarded almost 300 projects. Most of those projects, are under $20 million. I'd say about 80% of them. When you look at the technology usage, you got 93% using project management tools, 70% plus using safety technology, and you hit all aspects: drones, pre-construction, augmented reality. So we have this now actual data. We can say, if you're a high performing contractor on a project, you are using technology. So now that shifted to artificial intelligence. The number one topic we are asked about, my whole team is asked about artificial intelligence on a daily basis. And, this isn't going away. It's impacting construction in a big way. So a few of the big high points I had mentioned is first that this is almost comparative to when the web was built. ChatGPT grew 15 times faster than Instagram. That is, which is the biggest artificial intelligence. This is not going away. There are so many tools coming out. I'm probably seeing at least one new tool a day on artificial intelligence. And, it's not something where I'm going too deep in. When we are talking about this to contractors, we are telling people what it is, what's happening. And at a basic level, artificial intelligence is just taking a large set of data and making assumptions and decisions based on that. We have all been using artificial intelligence for years. Our phones, I look much different than I did 10 years ago. My phone still opens up by recognizing my face. So this machine learning, where technology is getting smarter with artificial intelligence, we're using it. But I think everyone is looking at what's possible, what's out there. There is a lot going on in artificial intelligence. The big highlight I had mentioned is there's investments in construction in a big way. The team that was behind the Google driverless cars, they've now built technology that is making any piece of large equipment autonomous. Well, what does that mean? We talked about the labor shortage of 500,000 people. Safety. Autonomous large vehicles can go in places that might not be safe, like some of these mining sites, and they don't need to take bathroom breaks. So that is going to be an opportunity with artificial intelligence.
Wow,
artificial intelligence will allow people to walk around large equipment. If they get somewhere unsafe to them, AI will make sure that equipment shuts down so that no one is unsafe or hit by large equipment. So some of the technology is really amazing. But right now, what we're doing is we've built a whole website, abc.org/AI, where we've defined what artificial intelligence is. We've actually validated what artificial intelligence technologies are using artificial intelligence, because right now, as I mentioned, there's about 5,000 technology companies in the space. A lot of them are using AI as a marketing tool. So one of the things our team is doing is verifying who's actually using artificial intelligence in areas ranging from contracts to project management to timing in and timing out. We want people to make informed decisions. But the other thing is HR policies. ChatGPT, if you put something in there, that goes to the public. If you want something not to go to the public, you need to look at some AI tools like Microsoft Bing, where your information is not going to the world. But AI is going to impact many more areas. And I mentioned we're working with Meta. One of the things that we're doing is we are building use cases with Meta on how AI is going to actually impact construction, and actually we're working with them to build technology that's going to help contractors. So right now you've got tools that can immediately identify if everyone on a job site has all the proper safety and PPE gear, but the possibilities are endless. But those are some of the things that are taking place right now. And it's going to impact everyone. So my recommendation is to just continue to be informed on what's out there, but don't be enamored by what's possible. We're not using what's in front of us right now.
Wow. Okay, that is definitely cool. You got me at all the unmanned vehicles, right? It's like being able to put them into spaces that we before was very dangerous, or we don't have now the workforce to do it. So that is pretty neat, right? It's very, very innovative for us to be able to take that technology and put it to work specifically in the construction industry. So might be a little bit expensive initially, but we'll see how that goes, unless it's not.
I will tell you, some of these areas of business development, for example, you can use tools. ChatGPT is one of many tools that are helping with auto completion of emails and making it better. I know many people in industries, not just construction, where they write an email that says, "Hey, make my email better," and AI will do that. So there is some cheap ways to use it. It's almost like if you remember Clippy back in the day in Microsoft. We're gonna have the AI Clippy going forward. But Clippy was the first use of AI, truly. But not all of it is expensive. There's so many tools coming out, and I think it's going to be really interesting when you look at the the design space, because you
Mhm.
can take some of these technologies with some of your models and say, show me this model at night. Show me this model with another building around here. It's really interesting what you can do in the design side of things, and there's tools out there where you can just simply say, make a woman construction worker, and it will make a 3D model of of that. And I've used that example with it's a technology called Spline that can make any image you want in 3D by just asking it. So ChatGPT builds 3D models with that type of technology. It's not just words.
Very cool. A lot to look forward to as the space continues to develop and change, and there'll be, who knows, maybe there'll be robots building construction, doing our buildings. I don't know, right? Maybe, hopefully not. We don't want to lose the human touch to it, but that is great information. Thank you for sharing that. I know that we need to be mindful of time, and there were some other topics that some other policies would have loved to have gotten to, but it's okay. We will maybe have another time that we can connect and follow up on a podcast. So is there anything else you gentlemen would love to share before we say goodbye to the audience today?
The one thing I mentioned just on what you said, there's a very popular picture on social media that says, hey, ChatGPT, build this building. It can't. We still will always need people. We will always need talent, and we will always need a skilled workforce. And AI will be a tool. I don't believe it's going to build buildings. We will continue to need that talent. So anyway, I just really thank you for allowing us to be a part of this conversation. And
Absolutely.
Know about government contracting but not sure where to start, state, local, or federal? Sign up for a free 15-minute assessment call with one of our coaches. Visit govconeric.com/call, sign up today, and we will share with you our step-by-step formula that we've used to help thousands of students win contracts. Visit govconeric.com/call to sign up for your free 15-minute diagnostic today.
Yeah, and I'll just add, thank you so much for having us on. And I know your audience has probably heard about a couple of these regulations we were talking about and saying, oh boy, what else is out there that I don't know about? And so I'll shamelessly plug our website, abc.org/reg roundup has got a list of all the regulations we're watching closely. Some of these are in the proposed rule phase or in the final rule phase. Some of them are rules that we're litigating, or some that we are expecting to come out in the proposed rule phase soon, or maybe in a second Biden administration. So, I think that, like I said earlier at the beginning of this conversation, that companies who are in the federal contracting space are going to need to be pretty nimble reacting to some of these regulations that are coming out. They're going to be given 30, 60, 90-day runways once these rules come out for a lot of these issues. And that's not a lot of time. So they need to be thinking about, how are they adjusting to these? How is this impacting their forecasts and efforts to go after federal work and with so much risk and uncertainty there? So a lot may change. We might have more regulatory whiplash if the elections go one way or the other. So just be prepared for that. And we don't like to make this a political conversation, but the reality is it is a political issue. The regulatory state certainly is. And so hopefully people understand that and kind of what's at stake in the next election cycle.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Your knowledge is just, we just really appreciate your knowledge. Thank you for sharing it with our audience, the time that you probably put into research and just keeping up with everything. We're grateful for that and how you support the industry at large. So thank you again for your time, and maybe we'll see you around on another podcast as more things develop right in the future. So thank you again.
Thanks, Randy. Looking forward to talking again. Take care.
Absolutely.